Welcome. Tonight we drift back in time to a windswept shore on the edge of the known world, to a colony planted in the soil of uncertainty, ambition, and mystery, a place where voices once echoed among thick-growing trees until they vanished one day without a trace. You're listening to Nightfall Sleep Radio, where soft-spoken stories and gentle mysteries lull you toward a restful sleep. So settle in, close your eyes, let your breathing slow down, and come with me on a quiet journey to the outer banks of North Carolina in the year 1587. Our story begins with a dream, not a dream of gold or spices, but of a foothold in North America. It was a foothold for Queen Elizabeth I in the New World. England was eager to rival Spain's growing power in the Americas. So, in 1585, Sir Walter Raleigh received a royal patent to establish a colony across the Atlantic. He called it Virginia in honor of the Virgin Queen. But Raleigh himself never sailed. Instead, he sent an expedition. Their first attempt failed, but a second group, this time including women and children, set out 2 years later. They were led by John White, an artist and mapmaker. His daughter Eleanor was among them. So was her husband, Ananias Dare, and soon their daughter would be born. In August of 1587, Eleanor gave birth to the first English child born in the Americas. Her name was Virginia Dare. It was a hopeful sign. But hope would prove to be fragile in this strange new land. The settlers chose to build on Roanoke Island, off the coast of present-day North Carolina. The forests were thick, the soil was sandy, food was scarce, and relationships with the local tribe was already strained by previous explorers. Things quickly turned tense. Within weeks, the colonists begged John White to return to England for supplies. However, he was reluctant to leave. His daughter and granddaughter would be left behind. Eventually, he reluctantly agreed. He set sail in late 1587, expecting to return in a matter of months. Unfortunately, war had other plans. When White reached England, he found the country was gripped by conflict. The Spanish Armada loomed off the coast. All the English ships were called to defense. No one could spare a vessel for a supply run. 3 years passed, and White was still in England. Finally, in 1590, White secured passage aboard a private ship. He returned to Roanoke. His ship arrived in August, on the 3rd birthday of his granddaughter, Virginia Dare. But there was no celebration in Roanoke. The settlement had been deserted. There were no signs of battle, no bones near the village, no smoke-blackened ruins. There was only silence, and one single word carved into a fence post. Croatoan. The letters were deeply etched, clear and deliberate. Before he had left 3 years earlier, White had left instructions. If the colony moved, they should carve the name of their destination. If they were in danger, they were to add a cross. There was no cross. White had hopes the settlement had simply moved. He believed they had gone to Croatoan Island. an area we now call Hatteras Island, where a friendly tribe lived. White wanted to investigate, but bad weather kept his ship from sailing to the island. He never saw the colonists again, not his daughter, not his granddaughter, not any of the 115 men, women, and children who had once called Roanoke home. Over the centuries, the fate of the lost colony has stirred minds and imaginations. Did they join the Croatoan tribe? That's the most plausible theory. Some oral histories from indigenous tribes reference blue-eyed ancestors. Some artifacts, including tools of English make, have turned up on Hatteras Island, but no solid proof has ever confirmed the settlers' arrival there. Were they attacked? It's possible. Spanish forces, hostile tribes, or even pirates could have overwhelmed the settlement. But there were no signs of violence, and the carved word Croatoan suggests a peaceful departure. Could they have starved, fallen ill, or scattered? Perhaps. They may have split into smaller groups to survive. Some may have headed inland, disappearing into the vast wilderness. Archaeological traces have been found far away from Roanoke, but nothing definitive has ever been discovered. Could they have tried to return to England? That idea is unlikely. No ships went missing, but no one can really know for sure. And then there are some stranger theories. Maybe they were cursed. Some say the colony was doomed by earlier acts of cruelty toward native peoples. Others point to a string of eerie coincidences, including storms, failed crops, and odd disappearances. Were they simply pulled into legend? As the centuries passed, the story of the lost colony began to blend with folklore. With each generation, the rumors around Roanoke became more intriguing. Let's imagine for a moment a gentler ending to this story. The air is warm, the cicadas hum in the distance, the trees whisper secrets in a tongue the colonists have yet to learn. It is the summer of 1590. The settlers, weary but alive, sit in a circle near a fire. They have made peace with the Croatoans. They have learned new ways to gather food, to fish the waters, and to read the winds. They no longer wear English clothes. Their bodies are lean and strong. Their children speak 2 languages, sometimes blending them into something new. One night, a storm blows in. Word reaches them that ships are approaching off the shore, but lightning flashes over the water, and the tide churns dangerously. They carve the word Croatoan into a post, hoping someone will understand. But the sea is too wild, and no ships make landfall. The settlers move further inland and never hear from England again. Many years pass. Virginia Dare grows tall and quiet. She listens more than she speaks, and the forest is her home. Some say she became a white doe, an enchanted spirit roaming the woods under a silver moon. They say she can still be seen today, just beyond the tree line. Others say the colony simply disappeared. It was lifted from time itself, absorbed into the land like a morning fog into the earth. But maybe they simply lived out their lives in the forest, quietly, gently, until time and history moved past them, And now, as you imagine the sea and the gentle forest, let your thoughts drift. Imagine out past the barrier islands and the bending trees, past the carved wooden post and the footprints lost to sand, and let the wind carry you softly toward sleep. You've been listening to Nightfall Sleep Radio, where mysteries whisper in the silence and dreams expand throughout the night. Sleep well and good night. Welcome to Nightfall Sleep Radio, where quiet storytelling and unsolved mysteries guide you into gentle rest. Tonight, we sail into the mists of maritime history, toward an empty deck, gently creaking on an abandoned ship. A ship that was set adrift on the Atlantic. The ghost ship. Mary Celeste was found drifting in the sea, her untouched cargo, folded clothes, and warm meals left behind, with no one remaining aboard. Join me as we explore what might have been on the good ship Mary Celeste. Settle in, close your eyes, and let your breath rise and fall like the tide. The year is 1872. The wind is rising, and a ghost ship waits just beyond the horizon. The Mary Celeste was a sturdy brigantine, 100 feet long, with 2 giant masts, and built for ocean crossings. She left New York Harbor on November 7th, 1872, bound for Genoa, Italy. On board were 10 people. Captain Benjamin Briggs, a deeply religious man with decades of sailing experience. His wife, Sarah, and their 2-year-old daughter, Sophia. They had with them 7 experienced crew members. Her cargo was 1,701 barrels of denatured alcohol, which was used in industrial applications. The first few weeks of their voyage across the sea were typical for winter sailing. There were choppy waters and strong winds, but nothing unusual. Then, there was only silence. On December 5th, 1872, the Dei Gratia, a Canadian merchant ship, spotted a vessel drifting aimlessly in the open ocean. It was about 400 miles east of the Azores. It was the Mary Celeste. There had been no distress signals. No one was on deck. The crew of the Dei Gratia boarded the ship cautiously, fearing disease or mutiny. But what they found was stranger than either. The ship's sails were tattered. The wheel was loosely tied. But below deck, the crew's belongings were intact. The clothing was dry. Meals were left uneaten. There was no water damage, no blood, no sign of a struggle. The only thing missing was the ship's lifeboat and the people. The cargo was mostly untouched, although later it was discovered that 9 barrels had leaked. Those barrels had been stored in a different type of wood than normally used. The ship's logbook ended on November 25th, just 10 days before her discovery. It mentioned rough weather and sightings of nearby islands, but there was no mention of anything unusual. The mystery deepened. No one could explain why the captain, his wife, their child, and the crew would have abandoned a seaworthy ship in the middle of the ocean. The Mary Celeste was sailed to Gibraltar for investigation, but nothing unusual was found. No charges were filed. The crew of the Dei Gratia received a small salvage reward, but it was far less than was expected, perhaps because the court remained uneasy. People were suspicious and unsettled. What could make 10 people vanish from a ship in the middle of the sea, leaving behind only silence? Over the years, many theories surfaced. Some were rational, some fantastical. The first of the theories was about alcohol fumes and an explosion risk. It was the most plausible theory, suggesting that leaking alcohol barrels may have released flammable fumes. The captain, fearing an explosion, could have ordered everyone into the lifeboat, only for a gust of wind or a broken tow line to separate them from the ship. But if they evacuated, why would they leave behind all their belongings? Another popular theory was a rogue wave or waterspout. Could a sudden wave have washed someone overboard, prompting a panicked evacuation? Perhaps. But again, there was no damage to the deck or hull. What about mutiny or foul play? Some wondered if the crew had turned on the captain, but there were no signs of violence. And the captain was well liked. His family was aboard. The crew had no motive and no benefit. Piracy was another theory. It was a classic seafaring fear. But nothing was stolen. All the valuables remained on board. No cargo was missing. Did a seaquake or underwater tremor make sailing on too chaotic? This was an unlikely theory. But if such an event happened, the captain may have feared the ship would sink. However, the lifeboat was never found. What about supernatural forces? A ghost ship invites ghostly speculation. After the discovery, whispers of sea spirits, time slips, and portals in the ocean began. Stories that were too strange to prove, but too compelling to ignore. The truth remains adrift, unclaimed, like the Mary Celeste herself. Let us leave the facts behind now and drift into a gentle imagining of that final day at sea. The Mary Celeste rocks softly in the swell. The sails flap like tired wings. Below deck, a small child's toy lies beside a folded blanket. The captain is watching the horizon. The sea is calm, but something doesn't feel right that day. Perhaps he smells something faint. Distilled alcohol in the air. Not strong, but sharp. He notices the leaking barrels. Could the vapors ignite? Could a stray lantern spark disaster? He weighs the risk of a potential fire. His wife, Sarah, becomes pale with worry. Their toddler clutches her shawl. He decides to give the order. Everyone must evacuate into the lifeboat, just until the fumes clear. They bring only what's necessary. There is no time to pack. The ship's wheel is tied loosely because they expect to return in an hour. The lifeboat rocks as it's lowered into the sea. A rope still links them to the Mary Celeste, long enough to drift to safety but stay connected. But then, a sudden gust whips past them. The rope slips from the crew's grasp. The lifeboat swings. The captain shouts. Crewmen scramble to grab the line, but it is too late. The Mary Celeste floats away, slowly at first, then with a current they did not see. The ship recedes, smaller and smaller, into the haze. On board the ship, Everything remains, silent and waiting. The sea takes the lifeboat to a nearby island, not with violence, but with stillness. And somewhere, perhaps, the spirit of the Mary Celeste still glides across the waves, empty, watching, remembering. As we imagine this ghost ship at sea, let the sails of your mind loosen and drift. Let the silence of the sea carry you toward sleep. You've been listening to Nightfall Sleep Radio. We'll be here next time with another mystery to gently unravel. Until then, sleep well and rest deeply. Welcome to Nightfall Sleep Radio, where quiet mysteries and gentle storytelling ease you into a restful night. Tonight, we revisit the early 20th century, a time of steam trains and silver rails when travel held wonder and each journey seemed to promise more than a destination. In the spring of 1911, a mysterious legend was born in the Italian countryside. A private luxury rail line departed from Rome, bound for Milan. It was meant to be a short and elegant journey, the kind reserved for dignitaries and dreamers who wanted to explore the back country in style. But somewhere along the route, the train passed through a tunnel and was never seen again. There was no wreckage, no distress calls, just silence and decades of mystery. Tonight's story is not about a disappearance. It's about discovery. So settle in, breathe deeply, and follow us into the quiet hills of Italy, where time slows down and stories wait to be found. Part 1. The Train That Left No Tracks. The summer of 1911 was bright and unseasonably warm across the Italian countryside. Rome buzzed with energy, its cafes and piazzas filled with conversation. From the city's main station, trains hummed to and from every corner of the country. Loading passengers at one of the platforms was a polished bronze 3-car train that stood ready to carry 100 passengers northward to Milan. It was part of the Zanetti line, a discreet, privately run service that was taking its maiden voyage. It was setting out from Rome with no whistles and no fanfare, just a smooth luxury ride through lush fields, valleys, and low mountain passes of central Italy. On that warm July morning, passengers boarded and took their seats in the warm wooden and leather interior of the guest cars. There was a professor with a worn suitcase, a young couple who had won a lottery for tickets, a botanist carrying a book of pressed flowers, a civil engineer carrying a stack of folders, and there was Clara Moretti, a young woman traveling from Florence on her way to begin an apprenticeship in Milan's growing fashion world. Clara had studied textiles and illustration, and she brought notebooks filled with sketches of flowing silhouettes and textile patterns inspired by nature. This journey was her moment to take a breath before stepping into a life that she had worked toward for years. The train vibrated with life as it filled with passengers. Clara chose a dark velvet seat near the back of the rail car. She pulled a new journal from her satchel and began to write. Observations about the train, daydreams of her future life, snippets of the conversations around her, a soft pencil sketch of the woman across the aisle with a ribbon tied like ivy through her braids. The train rolled forward. They passed Florence, Bologna, fields of green and gold flickered past. Then came the hills. They entered a long tunnel, but not one listed on the modern rail maps. It arched through the earth like a soft breath beneath a mountain, and the train was never seen again. There were whispers of an accident, a tunnel collapse, but no wreckage was ever found. and in the confusion of the war that followed, just a few years later, even the tunnel itself was destroyed. And yet still the legend persisted, passed quietly from station master to traveler, folded into guidebooks and forgotten footnotes, and somewhere in the hills the story waited. Part 2, A Journal in the Hills. Nearly 40 years later, a pair of hikers wandered through a forgotten trail that had once shadowed the old rail line. The woods had long since reclaimed the path, but the stones near the track still held their order. Trees bowed over the track bed, and wildflowers bloomed between the ties. They paused near a crumbling mile marker, where ivy curled like script across the stone. One of them spotted something, nestled beneath the roots. A satchel, worn but remarkably preserved. And inside they found a leather-bound journal. The pages were yellowed and dry, but the ink had barely faded. It began with a simple date, July 17th, 1911, and the name, Clara Moretti. The entries were graceful and light. Clara described the interior of the train, the polished lamps, the velvet seats, the steady rhythm of the wheels. She wrote about her upcoming job in Milan and how she hoped to design garments that felt like memories, soft, expressive, full of light. She noticed the passengers. The professor was sketching birds in the margins of a newspaper, the couple sharing tea and laughter. The conductor hummed a popular show tune as he passed. In her final entry, her tone shifted gently. The train has stopped, she wrote. Not with alarm, just quietly. And outside, the sky is lavender, and the light feels slow. I think we've come to a place that isn't on the schedule. I'm going to step outside for a moment, just to look around. I may stay for a while. There was no fear, no urgency, just the calm tone of someone arriving somewhere unexpected, and perhaps even welcomed. The hikers looked around. Nearby, they saw faint impressions of old tracks that veered off from the main path, half swallowed by moss. They decided to follow the track. Part 3, A Place Between Places. Guided by the soft curve of those ghosted rails, the hikers made their way through the woods. The forest air was still, filled only with birdsong and the rustle of leaves. After nearly a mile, they stepped into a clearing, broad and sunlit, cupped by gentle hills. And in its center stood the last car of a train. It wasn't rusted. It wasn't broken. It simply rested, as if it had been pulled along long ago and chosen to stay. The doors stood open, and inside they found velvet seats, faded by time, a half-packed trunk beneath one bench, and a stack of empty notebooks. On the windowsill, someone had placed a single pressed flower. It was dry, but intact. There were no passengers and no signs of distress. It was just a space held in waiting. They saw a side table and sat down Clara's journal. They closed it now, its ribbon marking the final page. The hikers did not open it again. They lingered for a time in the soft hush, and they quietly stepped away, leaving everything untouched. As they walked back into the trees, the clearing behind them seemed to fold gently into stillness, a place that was neither lost nor found, just remembered. Not all mysteries ask to be solved. Some invite us to pause, to listen, and to wonder. Perhaps the Zanetti train didn't vanish, but simply stepped off the map to a place that held space for quiet arrivals. And perhaps Clara Moretti, with her sketches and her hopes, found a path not toward Milan, but toward something softer, a different kind of beginning. As you drift into sleep, imagine the sway of a train on quiet tracks, the soft light through the windows, and a pause between destinations, just long enough to dream. Thank you for joining us at Nightfall Sleep Radio. If you enjoyed tonight's story, we invite you to subscribe for weekly tales that soothe the spirit and settle the mind. Until next time, sleep well and dream deep. Welcome to Nightfall Sleep Radio, where quiet mysteries and timeless tales guide you into peaceful rest. Tonight, we travel beneath the glimmering lights of 19th century Paris to a world where chandeliers shimmer above velvet balconies and secrets slumber far below. Beneath the opulent halls of the Paris Opera House lies something older than performance, something carved out of silence and lit by candlelight and guarded by time. There are whispers of an underground lake, rumors of a ghostly presence. But deeper still, there are stories long forgotten, ink that has faded, and scrolls that are sealed. And one young intern, just beginning her career in the opera archives, is about to make a discovery that will blur the lines between memory, music, and myth. So find a comfortable place, let the day drift away, and follow us, if you will, into the candlelit corridors of the past. Part 1. The Opera House and its Secrets. The Palais Garnier, completed in 1875, was more than just an opera house. It was a marvel, a statement of Parisian pride, crowned in gold and steeped in grandeur. With its massive marble staircase, its rose-hued foyers, and a ceiling painted by Chagall, it dazzled the public. But for all its opulence, the building also held its mysteries. During the construction, engineers encountered an unexpected obstacle: a persistent underground water table. Unable to remove it, they designed around it, building a hidden reservoir, an underground lake that still glistens in the shadows today. This quiet chamber, fed by unseen springs, birthed the famous rumors of the Phantom of the Opera. Although it was fiction, Gaston Leroux's tale was inspired by the real corridors, real trapdoors, and real echoes beneath the stage. Our story begins not with a phantom, but with Elodie, a 22-year-old intern working in the opera's sprawling archive. Recently graduated, Elodie had a reverence for history and a curiosity that often kept her working well past sunset. The archive lived behind a nondescript wooden door off the east wing, far from the crowds. It smelled of dust and binding glue and time. Elodie's job was to help digitize the old librettos, the composer letters, and rehearsal notes. But her favorite moments came late, when the building emptied and silence settled like velvet over every surface. One evening, she sorted a box labeled Miscellaneous, Unfiled, 1862 to 1873. She found something odd inside. A map, hand-drawn in brown ink. The lines were delicate but sure. It showed a lower level beneath the archive, not listed on any of the digital blueprints. In the lower right corner, there was a faded note. Forgotten room, entrance sealed, risk of collapse. She tilted her head. The sketch marked a stairwell just beyond the archive's back wall, a space that she had assumed was a structural dead end. Curiosity whispered, and Elodie, as always, listened. Part 2. A discovery in the depths. The next night, Elodie returned with a flashlight, a notebook, and the map. She wore soft-soled shoes and brought a scarf to cover her mouth. Old spaces she knew could stir up dust like forgotten memories. Behind the archive's shelves, she pressed along the wall until her hand touched something different. A thin seam in the plaster. It was a panel. She leaned her shoulder into it. It creaked, then gave way. The narrow stairwell was choked in shadow. Stone steps descended into the stillness so complete that it seemed to press against her ears. The air smelled faintly of wet limestone and beeswax. With her flashlight casting a golden tunnel ahead, she crept downward. Each step was hollow and soft. And at the bottom, she found a corridor, arched and old. Then a door, carved from marble and cracked near the hinges. There was no handle, but when she brushed her fingers across the surface, it groaned open, revealing a round room glowing softly with the light reflected from her beam. Books. Every wall was lined with built-in shelves. Not modern wood, but stone niches. Scrolls were stacked in bundles and tied with red silk. Books with hand-painted spines leaned together like whispering conspirators. And in the center, a table. Atop it, a lantern, ancient, brass-framed, and intact. Next to it was a velvet chair that looked untouched by time. But it was the sound that caught her. So faint, she nearly missed it. It was water. A gentle lapping, rhythmic and patient. The far edge of the chamber, just beyond the shelves, opened into darkness. And there was a pool, a lake, still and silent, as if it had been waiting. The secret library wasn't only hidden underground, it was built at the water's edge. The underground lake was its quiet sentinel. Elodie caught her breath, and carefully she stepped inside. She opened the first book she found, a personal diary written in looping 19th century script. It spoke of composers whose names she'd never heard, performances that were never recorded, pieces erased. Another scroll listed musical scores not found in any catalog. In another, fragments of a letter to a woman named Clarice, who may never have existed. It was a room of the forgotten, not lost through fire or flood, but by deliberate silence. And Elodie, gently now, sat down and began to read. Part 3. Echoes of the Past. She spent an hour, or perhaps 3, paging slowly through fragile volumes. The air felt thick with memory, yet peaceful, like the world above had paused. And then she found it, a thick, leather-bound journal. Its spine was cracked but sturdy, and the cover bore only a single symbol, a treble clef carved into a circle. Inside was a name, Camille de Roche. Her entries began in 1861. It said, "I have been given keys to the lower wing. No one else seems to care what lies beneath, and so I have begun my own archive. There are things too delicate for the public, too easily misunderstood, music that evokes too much, words that must wait for the right reader. I will preserve them until such a reader arrives." As Elodie skimmed the book, the final entry said, "If you are here, perhaps you are the one. Perhaps it is time. I am glad to have waited." Elodie closed the book, her fingers trembling slightly. Her lantern flickered, or maybe something had passed in front of it. She sat in the velvet chair, heart thudding softly, the only sound the gentle lapping of the lake. There was no fear, only awe, the gentle, eternal sound of time continuing, without judgment, without hurry. Elodie breathed in unison with the sound of the water. And the library, as if it was pleased to be remembered, seemed to settle in around her, books sighing as they opened, stories waking as she touched each soft page. Elodie returned to the hidden room many nights that summer. She never told anyone about her secret place. She didn't need to. It was her quiet space. The library didn't need the world to know. It only needed one reader, and so she read. she listened to the soft lapping of the water. On some nights, she left her belongings behind, trusting them to be there when she returned, and they always were. Sometimes she would sit by the water's edge, letting her fingers drift across its surface. Always calm, always cool, always waiting. Tonight, as you drift toward rest, imagine her there, seated in the velvet chair, the lantern casting slow-moving shadows, and the books murmuring softly around her. And far above, the opera house slumbers. The lake glistens in the soft light of a lantern. And somewhere, in a room hidden from maps and memory, the past breathes quietly on. Thank you for joining us at Nightfall Sleep Radio. If you enjoyed tonight's story, consider subscribing for more tales designed to ease your mind and soothe your spirit. Until next time, sleep well and dream deeply. Welcome to Nightfall Sleep Radio. Tonight, we wander down winding country lanes to the gentle fields of England, to a village hushed by time and memory, where an enduring mystery once stirred beneath the golden wheat. This is the story of the Green Children of Woolpit. In the 12th century, near the edge of a sleepy village, two children appeared as if from nowhere. Their clothes were unfamiliar, their language unknown, and their skin was softly tinted green, like the underside of a young leaf. The tale that follows is quiet and peculiar. It's the kind of story best heard under the covers with eyes closed. So settle in, take a slow, deep breath, and let the soft glow of mystery guide you into sleep. Chapter 1. The Children in the Field. It was late summer, the kind of afternoon where the sun drapes itself lazily over the landscape like a warm blanket. And in the village of Woolpit, the air smelled of ripened wheat and wood smoke. Bees hummed drowsily around the hedgerows, and a cart creaked slowly down a dusty lane. In the stillness, something unusual stirred. By the edge of a deep wolf pit, an old trap dug long ago to catch dangerous animals, two small figures climbed from the shadows. A boy and a girl. They blinked against the sunlight, shielding their eyes with slender hands. Their hair was dark. Their clothes were finely made, but of a strange cut and weave. Threads of muted blue and dull gold shimmered faintly when they turned, and their skin was unmistakably green. the soft, tender green of young beans or nettle tips, alive but out of place. Startled villagers gathered around them, murmuring beneath their breath. The children clung to one another. They spoke quickly and quietly in a language that no one recognized. They would not eat, despite being offered bread and meat. Their wide eyes welled with tears until a kind woman brought them a basket of raw green beans and fruit. The girl reached for them first. The boy followed. Together they ate with trembling hands, juices dripping down their chins, and a hush fell over the crowd. Something was different here. Chapter 2: A Home Among Strangers. Sir Richard, a local landowner, took the children into his home. His manor was modest but sturdy. Stone walls covered in ivy, cool flagstone floors, and a hearth that smelled faintly of lavender smoke. He gave them clean clothes and warm beds. He spoke gently, offering kindness more than questions. The children began to settle. Slowly, they tried new foods. The girl smiled sometimes as she chased the manor cat through the garden. But the boy was small and thin and seemed to carry a weight too heavy for his small frame. He grew quiet and pale, and within a few weeks he had faded away. The girl wept beside him, clutching his tiny hand. Her skin, once so vividly green, had begun to soften into the light olive of early autumn leaves. The boy was buried in the churchyard, and the girl remained in Sir Richard's care. Over time, she began to speak. Chapter 3: A Tale from the Shadows. At first, her words were halting, soft, and oddly inflected, like water echoing in a stone basin. But as she learned more of the villagers' language, she began to tell her story. She said that she and her brother had come from a place called St. Martin's Land, a place where the sun never shined. There was no bright day, no harsh glare, only a soft twilight, like the moments just before dawn or just after rain. The people there, she said, had skin like hers, green and delicate, adapted to the dimness. She said there was a river, wide and mysterious, and a land beyond it that glowed with brightness. One day, while tending their father's herd, she and her brother had followed the animals into a long, winding cave. They walked for what seemed like hours, maybe longer, and when they emerged, it was here. The light had hurt their eyes. The wind felt vivid, and the sounds were strange. The ticking of insects, the creak of wood, the rough rhythm of the English tongue. They had tried to find their way back home, but the cave had vanished. Chapter 4. The Woman She Became. Time passed, and the girl grew taller. Her skin became pale, her accent softened, and she was given the name Agnes. She worked in Sir Richard's household, tending the kitchen garden and gathering herbs by the stream, where dragonflies darted like bits of glass. She was curious and intelligent, and sometimes she was still caught staring into the hills at dusk, as if waiting for something or someone to return. In time, she married. Some say it was to a royal official in nearby King's Lynn. Others say she just moved away, and her strange origin was quietly forgotten. But the villagers of Woolpit did not forget. They remembered the green children, the soft fabric of their clothes, the unknown tongue, the whispered name, St. Martin's Land, and the way the girl had looked back at the trees just before the sun went down. Chapter 5. Theories in the Stillness. And now, let us wander through the quiet tangle of possibilities. Was it just a parable? A story meant to encourage compassion for outsiders? Was it a misremembered tale colored by centuries of telling and retelling? Or was there once a place, somewhere beneath the soil or beyond the veil, where the sun never rose and green children live beneath the twilight sky? Some people believe the children may have come from a Flemish family, lost in the chaos of war and speaking a strange dialect. Others suggest a dietary condition temporarily turned their skin green. And still others smile at the mystery and choose to let it remain. Not all stories are meant to be solved. Some are meant to be savored, like the fading scent of honeysuckle on a warm evening breeze, like the quiet flutter of a moth's wings in the dark, and like the hush before sleep. Chapter 6. Return to Woolpit. The village still stands. Woolpit is quiet now. Its cottages are draped in ivy. Its hedgerows are thick with blackberries in late summer. The old wolf pits have long since been filled, but the fields remain, golden, rustling gently under the moonlight. Some say that if you walk those fields alone, just as the sun dips down to the edge of the earth, you might hear something, not a voice, more of a feeling, the memory of a girl's quiet gaze, and the sound of wind passing through an old stone church, soft greening breath of a story that never quite went away. So tonight, as you drift, let yourself imagine the fields, the scent of the earth and wheat, the hush of leaves in the dark, and somewhere nearby, two small figures walking softly through the trees. Thank you for joining us at Nightfall Sleep Radio. If this story brought you peace, curiosity, or a gentle path to sleep, consider subscribing and returning again soon. We'll be here with another quiet tale. Until then, sleep well.